Hey there, welcome to another episode of Blake's Everyday Podcast. As you guys can tell, I've changed shirts for one. For two, I got a haircut. Finally, finally got a haircut. So no more giant bushy thick hair. Finally got a haircut, one that I can really enjoy and breathe a little bit in. So, last night we stopped at chapter 20. We finished chapter 20. So today we'll start off at chapter 21 of Exodus. I hope everybody had a great Sunday. I know today was church day, so it had to be somewhat exciting, right? Um, Gotta say, we had a guest speaker at our church today. It was cool, it was definitely interesting to say the least. It was it almost felt like a biology class though, because he got into good depths. This guest speaker was basically just giving us all the facts, in order for us to be able to defend our religion, whenever anything comes up. And basically, a big thing in today's church is that, a lot of people skip Genesis chapter, I believe, 2 through 11. And, you know, that's basically breaking down, that's breaking our foundation. I'm not going to get into too much depth of it, though, because I have a lot to learn still, and that'll be really interesting for when I can kind of understand it a little bit better. But wow, it was there's a lot of things going on. It made my head spin. I was like, just trying to take in all the information, but just like I did in high school, I did not take anything in pretty much. So, I I'm the worst at learning things. I was the worst in college when it came to learning things. I went to I played college football on a scholarship, and I tell you, they changed my position around, and I literally went from playing nose guard, which is like defensive, basically front defensive tackle, pretty much. But they changed me from that position where, that was pretty nice and easy. When I was playing nose guard, the linebackers would come and pat me on the butt, tell me uh, basically which hole they were going to go through, and then I'd just go through the opposite. That was pretty much my job, and I did really good at it. But when I got to college, I was too small to be a nose tackle, so they put me in the linebacker position as Mike, the middle linebacker. And I remember just not taking any plays in. They gave me a big handbook for me to go through all my plays, and I did not. I could not remember a single play to save my life. I just don't have that kind of brain. But as I've gotten older, it's a little bit easier for me to work on things. I'm almost like one of those guys where you just got to get thrown into the fire, or, you know, um, sink or swim. I'm a sink or swim type of guy. There's a lot of times where I'll sink. I'm not gonna lie. I remember um, in my younger years trying to work jobs that I didn't have the maturity yet, and I was thrown into these positions, and man, just not not a very good worker, and I would, if I was talking to myself right now, that kid would be arguing with me right now, telling me that he was a good worker, but I promise you, I was not a good worker until I was like 24. It took me a while, and I think that has a lot to do with having kids and knowing that you have something that's bigger than you, that you got to provide for, something that's gonna keep you marching forward, learning and striving to be good at something. Even at my current position, I'm not the greatest. I'm not saying that I'm a bad worker. It's just it's so different than what I have been accustomed to. Before I started doing what I do now, uh, I used to do directional drilling, and that takes a lot of hard work, and that was kind of my bread and butter. At that point, I got really good at working hard. There wasn't a moment where I didn't have some calluses on my hands and all that. I probably went through a pair of work boots every 3 months. It was a lot of fun. But now I work remotely, and I've gotten fat, and it's just one of those things. And I love working remotely, but it's definitely different, and it's hard to really snap into reality when you hit that keyboard, because you're around all your kids still. They'll be inside, of course. My office is in my garage, as you can tell, and being able to snap into a work dynamic when you got your kids being homeschooled from home, you're comfortable. It's definitely a different dynamic, and it takes a lot more focus than you'd ever consider, because it sounds like a dream, but keeping a job like that can be difficult. You gotta have the right mindset that you can do it, and be able to keep yourself focused on the task ahead, at hand, I guess, not ahead, but well, that too. But you get my gist, get the gist of it. But so last night we finished chapter 20, and today we are starting off at chapter 21. So I'll quit rambling. But the title for chapter 21 is Hebrew Servants. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year he shall go free without paying anything. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone. But if he has a wife, when he comes, she is to go with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. But if the servant declares, I love my master and my wife and children, and do not want to go free, then his master must take him before the judges. He shall take him to the door or the doorpost, and pierce his ear with an awl. Then he will be his servant for life. If a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not to go free, as male servants do. If she does not please the master who has selected her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners, because he has broken faith with her. If he selects her for his son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. If he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing, and marital rights. If he does not provide her with these 3 things, she is to go free without any payment of money. Anyone who strikes a person with a fatal blow is to be put to death. However, if it is not done intentionally, but God lets it happen. They are to flee to a place I will designate. But if anyone schemes and kills someone deliberately, that person is to be taken from my altar and put to death. Anyone who attacks their father or mother is to be put to death. Anyone who kidnaps someone is to be put to death, whether the victim has been sold or is still in the kidnapper's possession. Anyone who curses their father or mother is to be put to death. If people quarrel and one person hits another with a stone or with their fists, and the victim does not die but is confined to bed, the one who struck the blow will not be held liable if the other can get up and walk around outside with a staff. However, the guilty party must pay the injured person for any loss of time and see that the victim is completely healed. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. But they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property. If people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. Wow. An owner who hits a male or female slave in the eye and destroys it must let the slave go free to compensate for the eye. And an owner who knocks out the tooth of a male or female slave must let the slave go free to compensate for the tooth. If a bull gores a man or woman to death, the bull is to be stoned to death, and its meat must not be eaten. But the owner of the bull will not be held responsible. If, however, the bull has had the habit of goring and the owner has been warned but has not kept it penned up, and it kills a man or woman, the bull is to be stoned, and its owner also is to be put to death. However, if payment is demanded, the owner may redeem his life by the payment of whatever is demanded. This law also applies if the bull gores a son or daughter. If the bull gores a male or female slave, the owner must pay 30 shekels of silver to the master of the slave, and the bull is to be stoned to death. If anyone uncovers a pit or digs one and fails to cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the one who opened the pit must pay the owner for the loss and take the dead animal in exchange. If anyone's bull injures someone else's bull and it dies, the two parties are to sell the live one and divide both the money and the dead animal equally. However, if it was known that the bull had the habit of goring, yet the owner did not keep it penned up, the owner must pay animal for animal and take the dead animal in exchange. Okay. Wow. Interesting. I mean, I do have to say, if people now I know this is controversial, but as Christians, I think a lot of us are pro-life here. And I know this is Old Testament, but as Christians, you should be pro-life, right? So one thing to take into account is Exodus chapter 21, verses 22 through 25. If people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, but there's no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. Okay, right. But verse 23. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life. Okay. So eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. So Again, I know it's a controversial topic, but I mean, baby in the womb is not just a clump of cells. It is a life. I mean, consider that, okay? I'm not going to talk too much about it. I don't have a big following on here anyways, but we're Christians. We should be outspoken about what our beliefs are, and we got to stand up for what's right. Of course, there's a lot of craziness in the world, and I haven't heard too much on the subject here recently, but I don't know. It's yeah, life is life. It's not just a clump of cells. It's human life. And I think anybody that has a different point of view of it, I think a lot of people that think differently haven't had the experience of having a child. Obviously they're getting rid of them, which is terrible. I would suggest actually putting forth an effort of parenting a child and having that child grow. And I think you'll learn a lot just by that. I think a lot of those opinions would change drastically if everybody had the experience of being a parent. And yeah, I'm gonna just move on though now. So all right. So chapter 21 verses 2 through 11. God showed concern for people in bondage and granted them a means of gaining their freedom. But as with any situation involving a network of relationships, there were possible complications. Some people may have been affected adversely by the freeing of a servant and set out to stop the process. And when servants were freed, they needed to learn some difficult lessons about living responsibly without a master to direct their behavior. These same truths apply as we enter a season of spiritual renewal. Some of the people close to us may stand against us because they benefit somehow from our bondage. Such obstacles must be overcome. We also need to learn to live responsibly and unselfishly as we begin our lives of freedom. Chapter 21, verses 5 through 6. God offered each servant the option of becoming a servant for life. This idea of becoming a servant for life by personal choice was used in the New Testament to illustrate the commitment we should have to Jesus Christ. Being a servant to a loving and gracious master is a wonderful thing. It has been said that we are all slaves to something: our passions, material things, alcohol, drugs, the expectations of others, or any number of things. But none of these masters is kind. Only God truly loves his servants. He is the only master worthy of our voluntary lifelong devotion and service. I like that description. That's great. It's a good one. All right. Chapter 21, verses 12 through 27. These laws deal with the consequences of inappropriate behavior. Notice that compensation for wrong behavior is emphasized, making it clear that God holds us accountable for our actions. These laws reveal God's instructions for maintaining an orderly, healthy society when proper boundaries have been overstepped. They safeguard human relationships and personal identities, while also recognizing the worth of life and property. Chapter 21, verses 28 through 36. According to this passage, we are not only accountable for our own actions, but also for everything we own. For example, the Israelites were required to control their animals so they couldn't damage the property of others. Even if the owners were not directly involved in an accident, they were still held accountable for the actions of their livestock or members of their household. This kind of mature accountability serves as the basis for a just and responsible society. I like that, and I think we're starting to see that even in today's world a little bit more. You know, you hear about those school shootings and stuff, which is just terrible. But you know, they're not just going after the kid or whoever shot the school, right? They're going after the parents too, and you know, I think that's great. You know, what can you say? I mean, I that it's a terrible thing. These people obviously have terrible mental health issues, but that gives no excuse. And you also got to kind of look at whoever's been raising that kid. You know, what kind of trauma has been in that kid's life to make him think that that's a good route to go. I mean, and that whole subject kind of pisses me off, to be honest with you. It's a terrible thing, and these video games nowadays. I was watching a video clip where, you know, apparently like the Roblox crap. You know, they have like, you know, some kind of relive the Sandy Hook massacre. It's like, how the heck are they getting away with this? You know, why are we allowing this? Why are our kids playing this freaking game? You know, we need to be paying attention to that kind of crap. You know, my kids are staying away from any video games, and I encourage you to make that same step. I mean, it's ridiculous. And you know, I heard some news that apparently, and I don't know if this is true, but if it is, these people should be ashamed of themselves. That the new like Grand Theft Auto is apparently going to have schools in it. That's true. You ought to rethink your choices. You're going to piss off a lot of people, including myself. It's just terrible that you would even. I mean, the game's terrible in general. You're giving people ideologies that shouldn't be happening. I mean, it's terrible, and and I'm a hypocrite because when I was a kid, I played these games, but there are people out there with mental illnesses that are going to take this way above and beyond, and they're going to act out on this. And I mean, we've seen it over and over and over again, and I'm not saying that it's the video game's fault, but at a certain point, you know, and I mean, I hate to keep rambling, but at a certain point, when do we stop? When do we stop giving into this darkness? Why are we promoting this? It's shameful. It's disgusting behavior. It really drives me crazy. You know, I remember playing like Call of Duty as a kid. That game was gory. And I played Grand Theft Auto as well when I was a kid. But it's so much more visual nowadays. And I'm not saying they're like, I'd rather my kids, I don't want them playing Call of Duty, but I would rather my kids play something like that, you know, where they're acting as a soldier and defending their country rather than somebody running like not even a vigilante. You can't say that this person that you're playing as is a vigilante. You know, you're playing as a scumbag, just randomly shooting random people and running people over in your car and going to God knows where. It's just I don't know. It's just terrible. I'll stop right there though. That way I don't take any more of our precious time of reading the Bible. But I guess I'm just going on a ramble tonight, and I hope you guys are enjoying it. Chapter 21, verse 32. 30 shekels of silver was likely the standard or average price for a slave in the ancient Near East. Yet, as much as this may have been worth, it could not compare to the true value of a human life created in God's image. Oppressed people are often bound by a poor self-image. It would have been of interest to all slaves at this ancient time to learn that the Son of God would someday be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. He submitted to such humiliation so that he could heal us from our sinful past, breaking the bonds of our sin. He came to set us free, buying us back with his very life. Yeah, I mean, that's great. I love that description as well. All right. We are finally moving on to chapter 22. And I will say we're already 26 minutes in. So this might be either a really long video or we might just only make it a couple chapters. I'm hoping it's the first one because that's what I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it tonight. I want to keep going. I want to keep reading. So chapter 22, the title for chapter 22 is Protection of Property. Whoever steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it must pay back 5 head of cattle for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. If a thief is caught breaking in at night and is struck a fatal blow, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed. Okay, so I remember reading this in one of my previous videos. If a thief is caught breaking in at night and is struck a fatal blow, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed. Can you believe it? You're allowed to defend your household. Make it known. Make it known. I encourage everybody to be strapped at their own household. Again, I'm just going. But if it happens after sunrise, the defender is guilty of bloodshed. Anyone who steals must certainly make restitution. But if they have nothing, they must be sold to pay for their theft. If the stolen animal is found alive in their possession, whether ox or donkey or sheep, they must pay back double. If anyone grazes their livestock in a field or vineyard and lets them stray and they graze in someone else's field, the offender must make restitution from the best of their own field or vineyard. If a fire breaks out and spreads into thorn bushes so that it burns shocks of grain or standing grain or the whole field, the one who started the fire must make restitution. If anyone gives a neighbor silver or goods for safekeeping and they are stolen from the neighbor's house, the thief, if caught, must pay back double. But if the thief is not found, the owner of the house must appear before the judges, and they must determine whether the owner of the house has laid hands on the other person's property. In all cases of illegal possession of an ox, a donkey, a sheep, a garment, or any other lost property about which somebody says, "This is mine," both parties are to bring their cases before the judges. The one whom the judges declare guilty must pay back double to the other. If anyone gives a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any other animal to their neighbor for safekeeping, and it dies or is injured or is taken away while no one is looking, the issue between them will be settled by the taking of an oath before the Lord that the neighbor did not lay hands on the other person's property. The owner is to accept this, and no restitution is required. But if the animal was stolen from the neighbor, restitution must be paid to the owner. If it was torn to pieces by a wild animal, the neighbor shall bring in the remains as evidence and shall not be required to pay for the torn animal. If anyone borrows an animal from their neighbor and it is injured or dies while the owner is not present, they must make restitution. But if the owner is with the animal, the borrower will not have to pay. If the animal was hired, the money paid for the hire covers the loss. If a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married and sleeps with her, he must pay the bride price, and she shall be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he must still pay the bride price for virgins. Do not allow a sorceress to live. Anyone who has sexual relations with an animal is to be put to death. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord must be destroyed. Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt. Do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless. If you do and they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry. My anger will be aroused, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives will become widows, and your children fatherless. Wow. If you lend money to one of my people among you who is needy, do not treat it like a business deal. Charge no interest. If you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, return it by sunset, because that cloak is the only covering your neighbor has. What else can they sleep in? When they cry out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. Do not blaspheme God or curse the ruler of your people. Do not hold back offerings from your granaries or your vats. You must give me the firstborn of your sons. Do not do the same with your cattle and your sheep. Let them stay with their mothers for 7 days, but give them to me on the 8th day. You are to be my holy people, so do not eat the meat of an animal torn by wild beasts. Throw it to the dogs. Wow, I gotta say I like Exodus chapter 22. That was it's pretty. I wanted to say a bad word there, but I'm not going to. Isn't God pretty freaking awesome, though? I mean, just can you imagine that? my anger will be aroused, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives will become widows, and your children fatherless. Dang, that's wild. I like it though. So, chapter 22, verses 1 through 15. These regulations concerning restitution for property losses are related to the issues of personal boundaries and accountability. Personal boundaries and property should always be respected, and restitution should be made when such boundaries are violated or property is destroyed. Accountability for actions that violate others is an important part of God's plan for society. Chapter 22, verses 16 through 28. There are certain kinds of behavior that are abominable to God and brutally inhumane. God has set clear boundaries in such cases and demands our accountability to them. The Apostle Paul implied that such behavior, which is totally devoid of faith and commitment to God, is not only self-destructive but also erodes the very fabric of society. All right. I think we're going to go for it. I think we better try to read chapter 23. Now, we are 34 minutes and 30 seconds into this video already, but we're going for it. We're going to go ahead and get 3 chapters in. Whew. Oh, man. All right. So the title for chapter 23 is Laws of Justice and Mercy. Do not spread false reports. Do not help a guilty person by being a malicious witness. Do not follow the crowd in doing wrong. When you give testimony in a lawsuit, do not pervert justice by siding with the crowd. And do not show favoritism to a poor person in a lawsuit. If you come across your enemy's ox or donkey wandering off, be sure to return it. If you see the donkey of someone who hates you fallen down under its load, do not leave it there. Be sure you help them with it. Do not deny justice to your poor people in their lawsuits. Have nothing to do with a false charge, and do not put an innocent or honest person to death, for I will not acquit the guilty. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds those who see the twists, the words of the innocent. Do not oppress a foreigner. You yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners because you were foreigners in Egypt. I do like verse 8. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds those who see and twists the words of the innocent. I think we have a lot to learn about this whole book. I think the whole world needs to hear Exodus. For 6 years you are to sow your fields and harvest the crops, but during the 7th year let the land lie unplowed and unused. Then the poor among your people may get food from it, and the wild animals may eat what is left. Do the same with your vineyard and your olive grove. 6 days do your work, but on the 7th day do not work, so that your ox and your donkey may rest, and so that the slave born in your household and the foreigner living among you may be refreshed. Be careful to do everything I have said to you. Do not invoke the names of other gods. Do not let them be heard on your lips. 3 times a year you are to celebrate a festival to me. Celebrate the festival of unleavened bread. For 7 days eat bread made without yeast, as I commanded you. Do this at the appointed time in the month of Aviv, for in that month you came out of Egypt. No one is to appear before me empty-handed. Celebrate the festival of harvest with the first fruits of the crops you sow in your field. Celebrate the festival in gathering at the end of the year. When you gather in your crops from the field, 3 times a year all the men are to appear before the sovereign Lord. Do not offer the blood of a sacrifice to me along with anything containing yeast. The fat of my festival offerings must not be kept until morning. Bring the best of the first fruits of your soil to the house of the Lord your God. Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. See, I am sending an angel ahead of you to guard you along the way and to bring you to the place I have prepared. Pay attention to him and listen to what he says. Do not rebel against him. He will not forgive your rebellion, since my name is in him. If you listen carefully to what he says and do all that I say, I will be an enemy to your enemies, and will oppose those who oppose you. My angel will go ahead of you and bring you into the land of Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hivites, and Jebusites, and I will wipe them out. Do not bow down before their gods or worship them or follow their practices. You must demolish them and break their sacred stones to pieces. Worship the Lord your God, and his blessing will be on your food and water. I will take away sickness from among you, and none will miscarry or be barren in your land. I will give you a full lifespan. I will send my terror ahead of you and throw into confusion every nation you encounter. I will make all your enemies turn their backs and run. I will send the hornet ahead of you to drive the Hivites, Canaanites, and Hittites out of your way. But I will not drive them out in a single year, because the land would become desolate and the wild animals too numerous for you. Little by little I will drive them out before you, until you have increased enough to take possession of the land. I will establish your borders from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, and from the desert to the Euphrates River. I will give into your hands and the people who live in the land, and you will drive them out before you. Do not make a covenant with them or with their gods. Do not let them live in your land, or they will cause you to sin against me, because the worship of their gods will certainly be a snare to you. You think about where we're at in the world right now. You see New York City just being completely overrun by Muslims. And it's just, I mean, that hits spot on right there. I mean, you're looking at New York City being completely transformed into a terrible Muslim city. I mean, in a way. Do not make a covenant with them or their gods. Do not let them live in your land, or they will cause you to sin against me, because the worship of their gods will certainly be a snare to you. That should be a lesson. All right. We're going to go ahead and read these descriptions, and then we'll say a prayer, call it a night. We're already 42 minutes in. Dang, this might be my longest video yet. Chapter 23, verses 1 through 8. This section is basically an expansion of 20, verse 16, which prohibits false testimony. The truth eventually comes out. So honesty is not only the right policy, but also the smart one. Even if someone seems to be getting away with lies for a time, that person must still answer to God. In the end, he will be held accountable. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like when being a good like you see good people, just turn their back at a certain point, because they see these people that are doing terrible things. They see them being so fortunate, and it's just, they don't get hit with the backlash. I mean, I don't know if anybody's watched My Name is Earl, but that's always, they have an episode where the manager of the rest of this fast food place is just a crappy guy. And, Earl starts to become jealous because, well, he comes kind of like angry because this guy, he's just so lucky, and Earl was just putting up with this crap, and Earl's being the good guy, but it seems like every time he just keeps on getting pushed down, basically. But that's a good episode. I would encourage everybody to watch that. I will say that's another show. It's I liked it when I was younger, but now that I'm understanding and I'm following in Christ, and I know it sounds a little extreme, but even at that, in the show, he's following karma. That's basically his religion. And that's not how the world works. Karma's not a religion, and I mean, I guess you could say Buddhist, like Buddhism. You could say that that's a religion, but which practices karma. But I think I could be wrong, but that's not what we believe in. So I try not to watch so much of that stuff anymore. There's so many shows that make fun of our religion too. It's sad and pathetic. They're little cheap shots at our religion, and it's ridiculous. Chapter 23, verses 10 through 19. God gave instructions concerning Sabbath regulations and annual festivals for several reasons. First, these events were a time for worship, faith, and renewed commitment to God. Second, they were object lessons that pictured important spiritual truths for God's people. Third, they were times for rest. They protected God's people from overwork and imbalance. These events were designed to strengthen the people's health. Spiritually, emotionally, physically, we also need regular times of worship, reflection, and rest. Chapter 23, verses 20 through 26. God promised the Israelites the protection of his angel and the instructions necessary for living wisely as they journeyed toward the promised land. As we enter a new way of life, God does the same for us. He is able to lead and protect us in ways we will never know about. And he has given us his word, which contains instructions for living according to his plan. If we do as he says and look to him for help, we will experience the fulfillment of his promises. Chapter 23, verses 32 through 33. The temptations of life within the promised land serve as a vivid illustration of how proper standards and boundaries can be tragically forgotten. The Israelites were warned about the tendency to make a good, clean start, but then compromise values and goals. They were warned not to make treaties with people of the land. They were to push them out and placing them with communities of their own. It is easy to make a good start, but then compromise, allowing certain little practices to go unchecked. In the end, these things will spell disaster, eroding the new lives we have started to build. I couldn't agree more. But that was the end of chapter 23. We read chapter 21, chapter 22, and chapter 23 tonight, and I talked a whole heck of a lot. So, let's go ahead and end it with a prayer, and then we will call it a night. I'll set that up later. Oh man, it is hot in here for some reason. Maybe it's because I'm wearing a jacket. Dear God, we come here before you tonight and just blessed with everything that you've given us. We are just so grateful for this awesome reading that you've let us accomplish tonight. We appreciate you letting us read your good word tonight and every night. We have been so blessed to be able to read it and just enjoy it and learn. And we watch as you put on these challenges for these Israelites, and we see it in our world, even today, in today's world. Lord, we're so blessed for everything that you've done for us. We pray that you keep our families healthy and safe tonight as they lay down their heads to go to sleep, along with our own. And we pray that you just keep us in your hands, Lord, and just keep us on this journey. Keep watch over us. Don't let us stray. We want to learn. We want to keep learning. We want to keep walking in your footsteps, Lord. In God's name, amen. That was a pretty decent prayer. That was better than most of them that I do. Wow, my head is like... All right. good night. 50 minutes in. I hope you guys have a great Monday tomorrow. Have a great start to the week. We got this. Have a good night. Let's see. I gotta end it.